Hello and welcome back to my messy painting space while we start exploring how to paint up the Tully Sworn Swords using inks. So we're doing the banner bearer today, and I've already went ahead and base coated all of his armor in silver. I used silver by Vallejo Model Air for this. You can use any kind of bright silver paint that you'd like. And at the end of this, what we're looking to get is a model that looks like this. So the first part we're going to cover is doing the blue and red inks on the shields and on the banner for this guy. And then we're going to go over doing the armor. And I decided to try to make my Tullys look as close to the included card art as possible and give a brownish purple tinge to the plates and a blue to the scales. And everything else is just going to be how we usually paint, just glazes of ink over the leathers, and I use a slightly browner color to do the little clothing skirt there, but we'll go over that here in a moment. So right now what we've got is, today we're going to be using a paint tray since we're using inks and I don't want them to get diluted, so we're going to put it in here so we can store it and make sure everything's nice. And what we've got is, first is our blue. The blue I am using right now is the Bombay Blue India ink. Not a big fan of the Bombays. I just happen to have some in my collection, so we're going to go ahead and use it. My red is going to be a mix of that Naphthol Crimson that I like to use, as well as there's going to be, here's the mix, 5 drops out of that dropper of the Crimson, and then 2 drops of Bombay Brown. Although any more chestnut or sienna type brown that you're going to use will be fine. So, getting started, let's go ahead and start working on that shield. So on this shield, I painted my other models where I did these little waves in the silver as well. I think I want these ones to be white though. So we're going to start with blue, and the 2 areas of the shield we're going to go ahead and put blue in is right here and right there. And this is really easy. You're just going to take up a little bit of paint, or a little bit of ink on that brush. Hit your brush on some paper towel that you keep nearby. Mine is right here. Because you don't want your brush to be too oversaturated with the ink, because you don't want it to pool when you put the brush down. This way you make sure that you're only putting the ink exactly where your brush hits and you don't have it running off in an uncontrolled manner. Alright, so you're just going to come in here. You're just going to paint in that blue. Easy peasy. Alright, next, we're going to come in here and hit this area. Trying to be careful not to hit any of our white. Yeah, right there, I hit the white just a little bit there. Darn it. Alright, so we got the blue there, and as you just heard, I made a bit of a mistake and hit some of the white. Now, with the zenithial highlighting on this, with black and then white over it, you get a lot of gray tones, and I have found that the Concrete Slab by Badger Minotaur is a pretty good cool gray that covers the model well and very closely matches areas that got some highlight but not too much highlight. So I'm going to go ahead and cut back in. Oh, problem is we're still really wet. I don't want to take a moment. I don't want to take the time to dry it, so I'm just going to go ahead and brush that off with my finger, try to get that as dry as possible, And now we're going to cut in with that gray. Still pretty blue. So as that dries, we'll go ahead and hit it again, but that gray does cover everything up fairly well. All right, so the next color that we're working with is this brown red. So we're not just using regular red because this is the Tullys. This is supposed to be representative of the mud of their rivers, and it's described as being a very red-brown color. So, same thing as before. I want to make sure we don't have too much ink on your brush. And you, of course, are free to make this as brown or red or however you want. I mean, if you're not following this at all and you're making it green or something, that's cool, but I don't know why you're watching this. All right. Trying to be as careful as possible, but I do not have the world's most steady hands. And so when you don't have steady hands, that doesn't mean you can't paint miniatures. I've seen people who are really good and don't seem to ever have to go back and fix mistakes. And that's cool for them. Me, no. I gotta go back and fix stuff all the time. So don't let that be anything that scares you or steers you away from painting the, oh, I don't have a steady hand, I can't paint that stuff. You know, it just means you gotta play around with it a little bit more and move the colors. It's the same way when I'm just doing a normal painting. When I'm working on that kind of stuff, it's a lot of just back and forth and not being scared to make that mistake and knowing that, hey, you know, even if I paint this and it doesn't look right now, at least I have some kind of foundation now that I can start working from and build that up to make it look the way I want it. All right. So we've got that right there, and that's our red. All right, so we're going to move on to this guy. Now I got some decisions to make. I think even though it would make sense to have this bottom piece be blue for the water, I'm going to go red, and we're going to do blue as the middle stripe on here. So we've already got some red on our paintbrush. Now we're just going to start cutting in right here, and then we're going to, of course, let all that highlighting work we did with the airbrush show right through. And part of what we're seeing right now is, you see I'm tapping in to drop a little bit more ink in the wet areas. It's acting like it's really watered down. And the reason for that is I use Bombay Brown. It's why I don't like the Bombay inks as much. They are not very pigment rich. And with that, it acts as though I was putting my inks on a wet palette or something. Which, you can work around that, and if you find that you're in a situation where the ink's just not covering enough for this technique, once you have brushed across it and added that layer of moisture, you can come back in and tap in a little more ink, and it will just flow over those areas that are already wet. And it won't go anywhere else. It'll just stay where the water tension line ends, which is something you do a lot when you're painting watercolors. But it works for this too. I'm just going to go ahead and tap in a little bit more of my pigment. This turns a nice deep red. Okay, there we go. That part. And we'll go ahead and hit the top here as well. just want to be as careful as possible, especially here because the white on the that we're leaving for those inside stripes to get the white Tully color, they're inside. And when you're painting stuff that's on the inside of detail, it tends to want to move to the outside. So when it's one of the reasons a lot of people will give you the tip of you want to paint your miniatures from the inside out, pretend like you're dressing it. So you do your skins first, then your hairs on top of that, then your clothing, then your armor. So you come out, and that's because it's really hard to paint back in under a detail without accidentally touching some of the raised details. It's the same with this. So in this case, we want to make sure we're not rushing, and we are... Oh, crap. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You gotta be careful, and then I bump. Okay, because my handle slipped off the desk. All right, so we're gonna have to cut back in there too, which is all right. We can do it. But you can see how you just work through situations. We got some red on there. Now let's go ahead and cut back in on this shield. All right, we got a little too much red bleed over there onto that stripe. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hit it with my gray. It says pretty bright gray, but it's got enough shade to it that it'll read well as white in shadow. And we will hit this. Get a nice buildup of color. Same technique as before, especially with this Minotaur paint. It's made for an airbrush, so it is pretty loose on its own. So you can just make sure the area is wet and then tap your color in, and it will flow. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and brighten those spots back up with some Maro White from P3. I'm gonna get my blending brush, make sure it's wet. Put a little bit of white there, and I want to blend this out just a little bit because I covered it with too much gray. Tap in my colors, and now we're going to do a gradual blend and a tighter blend. And same thing over here. Gradual blend. And for that tighter blend, I just kind of push the wet brush into the wet paint before pulling it out, just to move it around a little bit. Okay. There we go. And I'm going to cut back in on the top of our fish with the bright white, where our brightest highlight would be anyhow. And blend out that head. That one was especially rough looking. And blend out the top. Okay. There we go. That is the shield with colors. And let's go ahead and see if where I messed up that stripe is cleaned up yet, or dried up yet, I mean. Let me clean that up. Just dropping a little bit more of that gray in there. And that, I just kind of poked it back in. And just in case it was wet, by poking it in, the brush capillary action will release the color right where I'm dropping, and I don't want to smear around any of that red that may still be wet. And it looks like I got a little bit more cut in right there with the red ink that we made up. Alright, and some of that red flowed back off. So we're going to go ahead and make sure our red's nice and clean before we proceed to the blue on the banner. And I'm going to skip filming the back side because it's going to be the same as the front. Alright. There's our red. And let's see our blue. And I have not done a test run of this yet, so hopefully this looks good, because I don't know. I think it will. I hope it will. Alright, we're just going to start cutting in our blue. Don't need to be as careful around the fish. Gosh darn it. I tell you guys to be careful, and then I can't be careful. But man, I'm being careful around the fish, huh? Not going to touch the Tully trout with my blue, but I'm going to touch the white with my blue. Good old Tullys. Kind of the laughing stock of the Seven Kingdoms, and they're the ones who have the most American-looking flag. Get that little bit of blue in there. My hands are especially unsteady today. What gives? Brushing the same area over and over again, so I'm getting a buildup of the blue ink there. It's getting too dark, so we just need to make sure that we take that color, that buildup of blue, and push it down. It's ink, it'll stay wet for a while. We don't have to worry about it drying in place. But you want to keep pushing it so you don't get those tide marks that will dry on there. Now, I usually talk more when I'm doing this, but I seem to be having a lot of trouble controlling my brush today. All right. Hit that area. I don't forget it when I go to hit the backside. All right, we've got that right now, and let's go ahead and clean up our mistakes, of which there are a few. I'm gonna start singing Queen here in a second. And bad mistakes, I've made a few. You know, something like that. The Tullys have had their share of sand kicked in their face, but they've come through. All right, and cut in with our light gray right there. Okay. So just carefully cut in, and you'll get some decent color on there. I think I need to clean up just a little bit of the blue as it's pulled away from some of the edges. Also, some of the issues I've been having with these models is from those Minotaur paints. Because that's what I use for my white, because if I just sprayed these with white primer tends to come out of the airbrush a little grainier than a white paint does. So I use the Minotaur paints to run my whites. The Minotaur paints are a little hydrophobic. They dry a little glossy, and because of that, especially wet paints tend to want to run off of them. Alright, and take my red, and we're just going to go ahead and hit this top edge. They're one of those things that I might forget if I just go ahead and do the back. All right, so there we go. We went from that. Let's see, I'm not focusing, am I? Hello, autofocus. Come on, focus. No, up here. Oh, you silly camera. To that and that. Okay, so I'm going to stop the camera for a second. I'm going to finish up this banner, and then we'll come back and we'll show the armors. Alright, we're back, and I went ahead and finished up everything I'm not going to cover in the tutorial. Just painted the shaft brown, hit brown inks on the parts that need to be leather, coated the scabbard there in blue, hit a little bit of gold accenting, and now we're going to go ahead and start with the purple. Alright, so for the purple mix that I've got right here, this is purple. Looks really brown. Let's see if I can bring that up so you can see it. There we are. This is what we're using for the purple. It is a very brown mixture. So what that is 2 drops of Burnt Umber by Liquitex. That is 5 drops of the FW Purple, and that is about 6 brush loads of the Golden Matte Polymer Varnish, which I go over why we use that in a different video, and just a bit of water to help loosen the whole thing up. As I'm looking at the color and I'm pulling it out, we can see that it's a very red brown, and that blue pulls it down just a touch towards cool. I'm going to go ahead and add like a half drop more purple. I'm going to push that color just a bit more into the red. Alright, there, and add a little bit more water. There we go. That's our mix. And that's getting a little loose after the water, so I'm going to have to touch it up again with a little bit more of the matte. The thing is, we want this to flow into the cracks of the models and really show off the details. But we also want to make sure that we get some kind of coating over the top of the steel to give it a bit of a tint. Alright, so we're going to take a brush of this, pull off some of that moisture back into the palette, and we're going to start with the helmet. And we're just going to go ahead and place that in. And as you can see, as it gets on the steel, it definitely gets more of a purple tone. And there's our first coat. So we're going to dry that up, and then we will hit it with another coat. Right now, as I'm looking at this, I'm not quite happy with the coverage. I would like it to come up a little darker. So I'm going to add a touch of my matte medium into that as well. Alright, we're back. Just move the camera over, and I hit this with the hairdryer real quick, and we're going to do another coat. As it is, we're just not getting the coverage I was hoping to. And when I painted these models, the rest of this group, it was quite some time ago. I wrote down the mix I used, and I have no idea what happened to those notes. So taking notes when you're painting is good. Losing notes is bad. Let's go ahead and drop the color on there. Tap it around. You want the pigments to pool in the low spots, and you want the high spots of the metal to still poke through, so we're going to get some shine on them. And you're going to get this thing to adjust. Alright, there we are. Okay, so here's the helmet. We're going to go ahead and continue doing this for the model. What I think we might do after this is go to a GW product and give it a few coats and then dry brush it back up. That might give me the look of the other models. So having to do multiple coats of this. Multiple coats was not such a big deal when I was painting 11 other models, because by the time I got back around, of course, everything was already dried back up. And I could just keep painting. But now, with you guys watching, that's not as great of an option. And if I change the method and we get the same effects, but it dries faster, that doesn't hurt anybody, does it? It's actually good for you guys to save time. Maybe you don't have time to sit down and work on 12 models at once, and breaking it into a group of 4 or 5 might be where you're at. If that's the case, something like this would probably still be sort of wet. Go in there, drop that on that armor. Let's hit that real quick at the shoulder pad. Hit the greaves. Back of that greave. Those Sabaton plates to pop. Get this side of the greave. Get the knee pad. Is that coater or something like that? Bloop, 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 bloop. And as always, painting is more effective with sound effects. Use your sound effects, people. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and stop this because I'm recording myself just plopping wash everywhere. So you just want to go ahead and wash this, and when you're washing, you just want to make sure you don't have any pools where you don't want them. If there's a pool there, just stay in that area, keep working it, and pushing that ink around so you don't have a pool where you don't want it. You do want a pool there, cool, leave it. Try to keep the model in the same spot so it doesn't move. But otherwise, yeah, you want to try to brush that stuff around and keep moving the pigment. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pause this, and I'm going to hit the edges of the shield, and we'll come right back. Alright, so went ahead and dried everything off and did 1 second coat of the purple. And there we go. We have a nice ready purple metallic color, and now we're going to hit the scales and make them a little blue. Alright, so for this step, we want to take that blue ink we were already using, and we are going to add some more of that matte polymer varnish to it. That and water. Just going to go ahead and load up your brush, drop it over there. Clean that off because it has a lot of varnish. Alright. And now we just want to go ahead and mix this in. I just realized I'm not on camera for this. I gotta move the camera. You guys can see what I'm doing. Alright, there we go. Alright, so we're making up our blue ink. I've got too much coverage yet, so I'm adding a little water. That's getting pretty translucent. Add a little bit more water. Alright, so nice and translucent, runny. Okay, I'm going to do one more drop of the varnish, because I want the varnish to help it flow into the cracks and keep just a little bit on the top. Alright, so again, I'm going to go ahead and draw this up onto the palette so you can see how it runs. Translucent, blue, that should be about what we're looking for. Alright, so we're going to take this and just start brushing it over the scale. And as you can see, the metallic still shows through on the top. And it's still shiny. The shine's taking a blue tint, and the blue is really sinking down into the texture of the scales to help pop that texture out. Which is exactly what we wanted it to do. So yeah, there's no exact mix for this blue. It's just add water, add varnish, add ink, play with the mixture till it's nice and translucent. You don't want it to look like water, you don't want it to be too runny, but you want to make sure that you can see through it. Ooh, got a little silver there. I'm going to cut that in here in a second with a little bit of paint and try to cut it out. Alright. And there we go. We've got blue scale and a red-purple plate. Alright, well, that is it for this. The last thing, if you want to add a little bit more shine to your purple, of course it's totally effective like this, and I think that's still catching enough shine to be metallic, but I'm going to give it a little bit of a dry brush, dull it down a little bit, and try to get it more in tune with this guy's helmet. Let me see if I can get that to focus. Yeah, there we are. So I want to make sure there's a little bit more shine, especially on that left upper bit that I always like to make the sunlight come from. Alright, so there's that, and the armor's looking good. The only thing I need to do is come back in and correct some of that little metallic spill over onto his skirt. But yeah, there you go. Have fun painting your Tullys.